we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Radio, Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for joining me, whether you're listening over the air on 96.5 FM The Answer in Little Rock, Central Arkansas, or if you're listening online via the 96.5 FM TheAnswer.com website, or if you're listening delayed on the podcast, which is always posted on the blog and iTunes and Stitcher and even on YouTube, the YouTube channel. Make sure to check that out, youtube.com/go Shane Plays. And then finally, we're always carried a week delayed on Krypton Radio. KryptonRadio.com is SciFi for your Wi-Fi. So thanks so much for joining me. Also, remember, this is live Geek Talk Radio. This is not just a podcast. There's nothing wrong with podcasts, but this is something more. This is live Geek Talk over-the-air radio that you can interact with if you so choose. And the number there is 501-823-0965. That's 501-823-0965. Or you can tweet me at Shane Plays, ShanePlays. Another thing, always remember that there are show notes up right now at shaneplays.com, ShanePlays.com, that have links for both our guests today and the news items. So if you want to know more, or if you're like, I'm not sure what they were talking about, make sure to get on over to shaneplays.com and check out the show notes. So another very cool show today, joined by friend of the show. I think this is his third appearance. And you also hear him every time you hear the Mega Wars commercial on this show. That is also our guest, Mr. Neal Hallford. And he's known for many things. We had him on a few weeks ago for his award-winning short horror film, The Case of Evil, which if you haven't seen that yet, shame on you, go watch it. But he's also well known as a game designer. And probably one of the games that he's most known for is Betrayal at Krondor, which was a role-playing game from the 90s, very popular, very successful, that was based on the Raymond E. Feist novels, the Midkemia novels, A Magician Apprentice and Magician Master, and so on and so forth. And his writing was so good that it ended up, Raymond E. Feist ended up adapting what he did into a book called, I think, Krondor the Betrayal. So, so we're going to be talking, Neal's doing some interesting stuff, kind of revisiting Betrayal at Krondor, kind of showing how game design works from the behind the scenes. And then he's also using a new AAA game design engine called Lumberyard from Amazon. So we're going to be talking about that today. But first, of course, he's going to come along for all the witty banter during our news segment. Hey, Neal, are you there, buddy?
I am here, but you're putting up an awful. I have to be witty this morning. I didn't realize. I had to be
no, you got to be witty. Yeah, I sent a note to your wife saying, "Hey, Jane asked, can you make sure Neal's witty this morning?" Did that did that not get?
All right, I'll try to do my best. But
all right. Well, we're going to talk more about Betrayal at Krondor and your game development using Lumberyard and those things very soon. We're going to have what I hope to be is a short news segment. I always say it's going to be short, and then I blow it, Neal. So I'm counting on you to help me be quick, because there's people that want to hear the news, but then there's also people that are like, I just want to talk. I want to hear Neal talk about Betrayal at Krondor. So let's try to find a happy medium, folks. Remember, you could talk yourself to Neal at 501-823-0965, or you can tweet me at Shane Plays if you have a question. And if RPG Codex, I'm monitoring the website if anybody has any questions. And Ninjerk from RPG Codex did say he want to make sure that I passed along to you that just several people are very excited to see what you're going to do with your Betrayal at Krondor Remastered project, which, before we even get into that topic later in the show, this is not a commercial product that you're doing. This is a personal project you're doing to take, I think, the first chapter, if you will, of the game and remaster it. This isn't something that is going to go out on the shelves or anything like. Okay, so anyway, before we get to that, GL, my man himself, sitting in the producer's chair. Can you turn on the microphone so we can listen in on our news team in there and see what's going on? We got the GL is learning the ropes with Zach, and they're in there making sure everything comes together. Is the microphone broke? We're working on it. There it is. Whoa, there it is. There they are, working hard. Love those guys and gals. All right, love they work on Saturdays. They don't. I don't think they figured out yet that we listen in on them. But anyway, all right. So here, the first news item. Obviously, I think I have to lead with this, Neal, is that Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, the official teaser trailer, is out now. And I think it's funny they call it a teaser trailer because it's like a minute and a half long.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. I don't think teaser trailer means what it used to. So,
no, not at all.
Yeah. So have you seen it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
what did you think?
I am jazzed.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good.
Because of course, I was exactly the right age to see whenever the original came out, and I get the same chills from whenever I saw the original Star Wars.
Oh wow! Well, I think it's worth noting. This is they're doing this new trilogy that started with The Force Awakens, but in between years they're doing one-off Star Wars stories, and this is the first one, and this tells the story of when they stole the Death Star plans for the first Death Star. So if I understand right. And so it's set actually before A New Hope. So it's set in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. It looks good. It's got Forrest Whitaker in it. It's got some other folks in it. I think it's going to be fun. It looks like a good Star Wars movie. I do want to, there's a couple of things I want to point out here. One is the name, it's not Star Wars whatever, it's Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I think that's interesting. So it's not Star Wars Rogue One. I wonder if they're going to continue that, like they're going to have other ones in it. So they're just going to call it a Star Wars story, and that helps differentiate it from the main trilogy storylines that are going on. I'm not sure. And the other thing, go ahead.
I'm betting in the branding you're going to see the Star Wars little frame around the outside of it. There's no way that they're going to not monopolize or to take advantage of that. So.
Right. Well, they do. It says Rogue One, and the little frame goes around Rogue One, and in the bottom of the frame it says a Star Wars story. So they're still doing that. But it's interesting that it doesn't lead with Star Wars, right? So I wonder if a Star Wars story or how they're going to differentiate. This isn't part of the main trilogies that are going on. I don't know. The other thing I want to ask you your opinion on this: how with the amount of Star Wars content that Disney's putting out, how long is it till a new Star Wars movie is not really a major event?
That's a really good question.
Because we're talking about getting Star Wars movies every year for like 6 years.
No. Well, the thing about it is we are. I mean, the plan has been to roll them out every December, and of course, the question is whether they're going to be able to do that, because it sounded like that episodes, I guess 7 is late, or 8 is late, or whatever. It sounded like they had started production a little bit later than I expected. So, though I'd heard they said they thought they were going to be able to make at the time, so we'll see. But it is a very good question about how, I don't think that there's going to be a risk of us reaching Star Wars fatigue too soon, because think about it this way: Marvel's releasing 3 new movies every year, right? And so we don't seem to be slowing down on that yet. Well,
I'm not specifically talking fatigue. I don't think we'll ever hit Star Wars fatigue, but I'm talking about where it's like an event, right? Where it's like, whoa, it's almost like Christmas if we get a Star Wars movie. I'm wondering if we're going to get to the point where it's not quite it's more like getting a James Bond movie rather than a Star Wars movie. There's always going to be a big audience that's excited about it, but when does it stop being a cultural event? And I think that'll happen sooner or later if they keep putting out this many Star Wars movies. That's just true. That's just my. I don't know. Who knows? Never underestimate fandom, though. So it could it could be a cult.
Ever.
Yeah, don't ever. Both for the good and the bad. And we have a couple of stories later on more the negative side of fandom. All right, and then here's a Star Wars news, real quick. Erik Bauersfeld, who was the voice of Star Wars Admiral Ackbar, and was also in A Force Awakens, has died at 93.
Yes.
So and he's well known for the It's a Trap line and all that. But Admiral Ackbar has become a major, I guess, secondary character in Star Wars, well known, kind of beloved. So we have lost Erik, and we wish his friends and family well. So any thoughts there on Admiral Ackbar there on Neal?
Well, it's just very sad. We've actually lost two people in a relatively short time. We lost him, and we also lost the fellow who did, and I can't remember the fellow's name, but he was the co-pilot for Billy D. Williams.
Oh, yeah, I know you're talking about. He played Cy Snum, or he played the Celestin. Let me look up his. Let me look him up. I know exactly who you're talking about.
But he passed away about seems 3 or 4 weeks ago.
I remember seeing that. I should have made a news item out of that. I'm gonna
we
find
lost two original trilogy people in a fairly short period of time here.
Right. I'll make sure to find his name before the show's out, so we can also give him a tribute, because these guys are, they're a major part of pop. People know these characters.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're not talking about random, guy in the cantina. These were both speaking characters, and so.
Well, my favorite with the Celestin is when they knock the radar dish off the Millennium Falcon, and it sounds like he does like a little curse word. He says something kind of off the side of his mouth when that happens. So I always love that scene. All right. So speaking of space and actually maybe getting to space and having our own adventures, I'm sure you saw, Neal, that SpaceX stuck the landing and did not explode on recovering the booster rocket yesterday.
Yes, finally.
Yeah, that was super cool.
And so I just thought it was. I was actually kind of surprised, though, that it's taken Elon Musk this long to kind of catch up, because Jeff Bezos beat him to it by a couple of months.
Well, the thing is, though, I mean, I think this is a lot harder than people, think. But two, what was neat about this was, and the reason it's such a big deal, because a huge part of the cost of delivering stuff to space is you lose your booster rockets. Yeah. And this is actually, they've actually launched a booster rocket, the Dragon vehicle, popped off of the rocket and is heading towards the ISS to do a delivery. And the booster rocket actually returned to Earth and landed right side up on a tiny little barge that wasn't much larger than it was. Mm-hmm. In the ocean. I don't think people realize how hard that is.
Well, I mean, it's very hard, because this is something that they've been planning on doing since the 20s.
Right. Oh, I didn't know that. So they've known the principle of it since the 20s.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time, because of course we go back and we look at all the old pulp science fiction, and we all know that rockets are supposed to land vertically.
Right.
And we've known that for ages, but it's just kind of funny that we've taken this strange round trip of rockets and all this other stuff, and said no, it's going to be a space plane, and then we're back to rockets again. But again, because it makes much more sense, because with the others, you have all the issue of throwing away those SRBs, because a lot of the elements of the space shuttle, though the idea was to recycle it, there was a big chunk of stuff that was not actually that recyclable.
Right.
So it actually ended up being extra expense and not really the bargain they were looking for. And so we're back to having just one vehicle. You take off with it, you land in it. And I think it's really exciting and awesome.
It is exciting. I mean, I love this stuff. And I just, the engineering involved behind all this, because the booster rocket landed robotically, and the barge that it landed on was robotically, if I understand correctly. So, or at least automated. So very fast. You got to keep moving on, but it's exciting stuff. So kudos to SpaceX, and kudos also to what Jeff Bezos is doing. I can't remember what's the name of his space venture.
I can't remember.
Okay, yeah, I can't either.
Yeah. But yeah, they actually did their first successful landing. It was about 2 or 3 months ago.
I remember that, yeah. But they landed like on the ground, whereas this SpaceX has landed on a little floating robotic barge out in the middle of the ocean. So, all right. So moving right along, we finally have our first looks at what Batman: The Killing Joke is going to look like as an animated feature. That's from Polygon. By the way, the previous stories, the Admiral Ackbar story was from CNN. The SpaceX sticks its landing does not explode was from Krypton Radio. This is linked at shaneplays.com in the show notes. And, from our mutual friend Gene Turnbow at Krypton Radio. And then this story comes to us courtesy of Polygon. But I don't know if I know you're a movie geek. I don't know if you're a comic book geek or not.
Well,
Go ahead.
To a degree, I like I say, I'm kind of really, when it comes down to the core stuff, I mean, the basic stuff, there's some of the stuff that's floating around out there, the more obscure stuff I don't really know anything about, but, I'm like any other kid. I grew up reading DC Comics, and so...
Right. Right. So, well, this is what's interesting about this is, Batman the Killing Joke is probably behind Dark Knight Returns, is probably one of the most influential and revered graphic novels or stories of Batman from the 80s. And it was done by Brian Boland, who's this amazing artist. And a lot of what this talks about is it's really hard to animate his style. So here's what we had to do. And also you kind of get to see, what the movie's going to look like. And of course, you got Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill reprising their roles as Batman and the Joker, respectively. So go to shaneplays.com, follow that link, and check that stuff out. Now, we've got a couple of things on the... what could be considered more of the negative side of fandom, or the downside of fandom, is the controversies that erupt, Neal. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on these, but I did want to point out that, once again, our friends at Krypton Radio have put up an editorial that got a lot of exposure online, and it says Paramount lawsuit becomes studio's own Kobayashi Maru with a question mark. Of course, Kobayashi Maru is the famous no-win scenario from Star Trek Wrath of Khan. And it's talking about that CBS and Paramount, and there's some differing on whether this is CBS doing this or Paramount, but it seems like mainly Paramount is suing a fan film production called Axanar. Now, when you dig into this, there's no clear right or wrong. I feel there's stuff legitimate on both sides. I don't want to go into that here, but what I'm saying, this is a good editorial. It got a lot of traction. So if people are interested in that sort of thing, go check out the editorial on Krypton Radio. And it's going to be a big news story as it continues to unfold. One, because it involves Star Trek on their 50th year anniversary. And two, fan films are getting bigger and bigger and bigger for fandom. So the way this plays out is going to have major impact in fandom, movie making. As a movie maker yourself, Neal, the way this plays out could potentially affect what you do in the future. So it's a big story. And then finally, again, I'm not going to go into the details. People can go check this stuff out if they want. I've actually got an editorial up at shaneplays.com called The Siege of Dragonspear, a Baldur's Gate story. We actually had Beamdog, the Siege of Dragonspear developers, on a couple of weeks ago. Enjoy talking to them very much. I'm playing the game and having a good time with it. But there is a bit of a brouhaha over whether it's real or not, a perceived social justice warrior agenda in the game itself from the writers, and a portion of the consumer base reacting very strongly to that. So, and in my editorial, I try to be fair and even-handed for the most part. Although I do lay a little bit of the blame on at Beamdog's feet, but by no means all of it. So that is the news. Neal, do you have anything you want to add to the news, buddy?
No. I mean, I think you kind of covered it there.
Covered it all. All right. Well, I found, dang it all. Here we go. The actor. Okay. So Nine Numb, that was the Celestin from Return of the Jedi. Nine Numb. This is the person we're talking about who passed away recently. He was a puppet and a costumed actor. The puppeteer was Mike Quinn. And then Richard Bonehill portrayed him in Wide Shots. So I'm pretty sure it's Richard Bonehill who we lost, the actual actor who portrayed him. So
I believe that's the case.
Yeah, so we've lost two, major, well-known actors who brought beloved Star Wars characters to life. Okay, with that, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Neal Hallford about things he's up to, most specifically the Betrayal at Krondor Remastered project and the Amazon Lumberyard game design engine. Make sure to stay tuned, because at the end of the show, I always do the tweet of the week, and that's always a lot of fun. So anyway, GL, take us to a break. When we come back, it's going to be more Neal Hallford on Shane Plays Radio.
Hold on to your butts. June 11th and 12th at the State House Convention Center in Little Rock, the River City Comic Expo is Arkansas's largest comic, toy, game, cosplay convention and now features the Little Rock Picture Show. Guests for 2016 include Neal Adams, Mike Zeck, James Aubert, Larry Hama, Michael Golden, and Arkansas's own Mitch and Elizabeth Brettweiser, John Lucas, and Dusty Higgins. You'll find booth after booth with artists and dealers representing comics, toys, books, movies, games, and so much more. So come on out to the River City Comic Expo, June 11th and 12th at the State House Convention Center in Little Rock. RiverCityComicExpo.com.
Fairly alarmed here.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
Megawars.net. The classic online space strategy game has returned, bigger and better than ever before. Scout the universe and claim your empire. Construct, customize, and launch dozens of different starships. Battle thousands of opponents online in a team-based competition leading to the ultimate battle of the galaxies. Grab your slot today in one of the most hotly anticipated indie games of 2015. Visit megawars.net and get options only available during our pre-sale event running now. Megawars.net.
The die is cast. Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions. Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.
Hey, we're back on Shane Plays Radio, Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I'm joined by friend of the show, Neal Hallford. We're going to be talking about Betrayal at Krondor, which is a very well-known and for many people very beloved role-playing game based on Raymond E. Feist novels from the 90s. And Neal is doing something really cool as a personal project. And he's remastering a portion of the game using the Amazon Lumberyard game design engine, which is striving to be a AAA game design engine along the lines of like Unreal and I can't forget the other. I'm forgetting the other ones that's out there right now. There's two other main ones. So Neal, I mean, obviously we could spend the next hour or two talking about the old Betrayal at Krondor game. Due to time constraints, I'd like to just talk about what you're doing now.
Okay.
And if you want to just briefly give us the elevator statement on what Betrayal at Krondor was and your involvement in it, please do. But let's talk about the cool stuff you're doing with it now.
Okay. Well, so just a snapshot of what you were talking about. So you kind of introduced it earlier. Again, it was the original game was something that John Cutter and I designed for Dynamics back in the day, and as you said, it was based on the worlds of Raymond D. Feist, and we had the license for it, but John and I, the story and all the dialogue and all that stuff that was in the game, that was all John and I, and we did all the design on the so all the the game design and everything else was all done there in Dynamics. So anyway, back in '93 was a really big it was a really big game for its time. It would be the role-playing equivalent of any of the big games that are out now that are in terms of RPGs. I mean, we won all the awards. We are in PC Gaming World's Hall of Fame, all this good
right.
pop.
And it's a really well-known game, and I know that just because you're not trying to toot your own horn, you're going to downplay this aspect of it, but your plotting and writing and characters and all that were so strong that Raymond E. Feist adapted what you did into a novel that became part of the official Krondor series.
Yes.
So that's the level the storytelling was on.
Like I said, that was a really big compliment, and Ray. There was also the sequel that I wrote that Ray had actually told me at the time that if we don't end up doing this as a game, then I'm going to do it as a novel. And so elements of that he later actually did end up using in his novelization, as well as a couple of the other further later novels. And so So there are some elements of what we created for that sequel that never got made that actually ended up in some of his later books.
Oh, that's cool. So now, are you still in touch with him at all, or I mean, what is there?
I'm every once in a while. Of course, Ray lives here in San Diego,
right.
As do I, and so every once in a while I'll bump into him at conventions and stuff, and so every once in a while we'll trade a message back and forth on Facebook, but. It's just kind of a casual, hey, how's it going kind of thing. It's not,
That's still extremely cool, and it speaks to your writing ability. So, now, so what you're doing, and this caught a lot of attention. So I want to be very clear to help people understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
You are doing a personal project where you are remastering a portion of the game as a personal, non-commercial product. Yes. In Lumberyard. So, first of all, I know it and other people know it, but just in case they don't, why don't you just make another Betrayal at Krondor game? So go ahead and address that really quick.
Oh yeah, so of course, this isn't the first time that the discussions about remaking Betrayal at Krondor have come up. I mean, honestly, for the better part of the last 10 or 15 years, pretty much as soon as technology kind of moved beyond what we had done with the original game, people said, you know what, we've got all this cool technology, why don't we go off and remake Krondor? And so there are a number of issues that are tied up with that, not the least of which is the fact that the license for the game is actually tied up with another game company, and really, for as long as those rights are tied up with them, I cannot produce a commercial version of the original game. And also, so people said, well, once you could hold a crowdfunding thing, said, well, it would be irrelevant because I could raise all the money in the world, and yes, I could.
Yeah, you don't have the rights. Right.
But it's kind of funny because you talked about Axanar earlier today. Is I could end up with a situation very much the same as what's going on with Axanar, except from a game standpoint. Okay,
so why? There's a lot of quote unquote spiritual successor kind of games being made today, where people are basically saying, "Hey, we're making a Betrayal at Krondor, basically type game, but it's not Betrayal at Krondor because we don't have the rights." Have you considered doing that?
One of the things I'm kind of doing with this particular project is, number one, is I am reconstructing the engine that we had for Betrayal at Krondor, and so the idea is that initially I'm just basically plugging in the Betrayal at Krondor content just basically as a means of testing this engine.
Right. And you blew. A lot of people are like, "What? Yeah." So we got to be really clear what you're doing here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're not going to get the full game remastered.
No. What I'm doing right now is we will have the first zone of the first chapter, which probably only amounts to maybe between 3 and 5% of the total game.
But how much gameplay time does that equate to?
My feeling is we'll get maybe an hour hour and a half of gameplay out of that, maybe. I'm probably going to add some stuff into, because while I'm remastering it, it's not just a straight up remaster. I actually am going to be expanding and adding some stuff to what we did before, because number one, some of the elements that were in the original game that were just sort of static 2D elements, I'm turning into 3D elements. One of the things I'm actually working on right now is taking the original puzzle chests, which originally were just a static two-dimensional 2D kind of flat interface we're doing before. You'll actually have a chest, you walk up to it, and it's there in 3D, and you interact with it in 3D.
Oh, okay. And the puzzle chests are things that people remember very fondly from Betrayal at Krondor. Yeah.
And it's one of those aspects that was very characteristic of our particular game. And so I've been working on that particular element and turning that into a full 3D experience. And so...
Hey, I want to interrupt just really quick. I forgot to do this when we came back from the break. If anybody has a question, and sometimes people call in, a lot of people lurk, a lot of people listen by the podcast, but if anybody wants to call in and talk to Mr. Neal Hallford yourself, it's 501-823-0965, or you can tweet me at Shane Plays. That's ShanePlays. And Neal, before I forget, how can people keep up with you with what you're doing right now? Make sure to throw that out.
So the best ways to do it right now is go to my blog, because it's where I'm talking about both what I'm working on with this game, but I'm also giving a lot of history about the original game, so that the two things are kind of related, because as I'm working on writing the new game, I'm also thinking about how we did things back in the day, and so I'm kind of writing up memories about how the first game got developed. And so just go to my blog, nealhallford.com. Also, for those of you who want to support not only this but also some of the other projects like my films and other writing projects that I have, just go and hit me at Patreon. So patreon.com/Nealios, Nealios.
Right, and that is linked. I linked your Patreon on the show notes. So I would actually urge people to keep up with you through Patreon. Because it's a constant reminder to, hey, maybe support Neal, because this stuff takes time. And, we've always, a lot of people probably think, man, this guy, he's made a movie, he's written this, he wrote Swords and Circuitry, a textbook, he made Betrayal, man, he's rolling in dough. No, Neal's like all the rest of us. Every day is a day like any other, where we have to, we have to get up and take care of business. So if you like what Neal is doing, please consider supporting him on Patreon. And that link is on the ShanePlays.com show notes. If you want to go to the blog, folks, go to the blog. I'm not saying don't go to the blog, but he posts, even if you're not a Patreon supporter, he posts his new stuff to Patreon, so you can kind of see what he's doing. So, and this, this all takes time. To do this stuff, even when we love it. So
there will also too is there will be stuff on, even though on Patreon I am echoing a lot of stuff that I am doing on my blog.
Right.
The blog stuff is free, but if you go to the Patreon, I have the free stuff I'm posting on my blog, but I'm also going to be I will have content. I already have a few things that's already. But there will be content that is on Patreon that is exclusively you can only see it if you are a Patreon subscriber. So there's going to be stuff about this project. I'm going to have some stuff coming up about the Con of Wrath.
Which I love this Con of Wrath thing. We're going to have a whole nother show on that. So the magnesium planet explosion is one of my favorite things in the entire world of history. All right. Anyway. Okay. So folks, follow Neal on his blog or on Patreon. Please consider supporting him. So back to Betrayal at Krondor and game development, all this stuff. So I'm not committing you to anything. I know nothing. I'm not trying to even imply I have any inside knowledge. I'm just asking you. It doesn't sound to me like some sort of game, possibly even a spiritual successor to Betrayal at Krondor, might be in Neal Hallford's future. Is that a fair statement?
That is a very fair statement.
Okay.
Because I'm not just going to build this engine and throw it away.
Okay.
And so I am heading towards something in particular. And
interesting. So, all right.
And so I will even go so far to say as that a lot of you who've been following me for a while already know what I'm heading towards.
Interesting. Okay. It's a puzzle chest. It's a cryptic puzzle chest. So I already know that there's RPG fans out there that just that statement right there is going to be exciting for them. So, so with the remastered thing you're doing, when you're just, 3 to 5% of the content, are you introducing anything new, narrative or gameplay wise, or are you just completely showing what it would look like in an updated engine?
I'm gonna probably add some new content into it simply because number one, what's the fun of just straight up just remaking what I did and not making any changes? I mean, one of the first things that you see that are most obvious is that I've changed I've updated the interface that we had from the original, because the original game was very kind of flat and sort of monocolored, which was just a feature of memory and
right.
also what we were capable of displaying back in the day. And so now the interface is very textured and it feels a little more 3D than it did before.
Where are you getting the assets? Are you developing them themselves, or are there open source assets you're grabbing, or what's happening?
It's kind of a mixture of things. There are, say, in Lumberyard, so all the trees and other stuff, that was part of a pack of stuff that came initially with the game, and so all the trees and plants and all that stuff, that was already available, so I'm able to just kind of plant those down and not having to mess with that. But the puzzle chest itself is something that I modeled in Blender, I've imported, and I'm working with right now, and so that's the one thing about this particular project, which is kind of another challenge for me, is the fact that even though, as a game designer, my job has primarily been about the story, writing the rules for how everything works, and that kind of stuff. None of the games I've worked on in the past have I had anything to do with the art. And so I am actually doing the basically all of the job of the entire game design team I'm doing myself.
Right, which takes time and resources. Patreon. Yeah. So, okay. I hate to go ahead, finish your thought.
Or the one thing that is actually kind of fun and it's new is that for the music for this, I am actually going out and I'm tapping different musicians to give me new adaptations of the old classic themes.
Oh, okay.
So we've already had Erik did a redo of the main theme.
Nice.
I have another gentleman who will actually did the puzzle music for the chest that you'll get to hear whenever I release the video about that. And there's some other artists as well who are going to be stepping in to adapt some of the other themes, and we may get some new travel music along the way here. So that's another thing. I'm kind of reaching out to some of these other musicians and folks and say, here's an opportunity for you to showcase your stuff. Cool. And I've additionally kind of told people, said, hey, look, if you really love the original game, there's a lot of items and objects and buildings and other stuff that happen in the real world. If you'd like to go out and say, hey, I'd like to do the Moradil Lamprey sword or something, go build me a 3D version of that I can drop into the game.
Neat.
And I will tell people that, hey, so-and-so provided this asset that we're using in our demo this month.
That is cool. All right. Well, I hate to cut us out. I got to get us to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about, and if you have anything else you absolutely want people to know about what they can find in the remaster version, please do. But I do want to talk about Amazon's Lumberyard a little bit and what your experience has been with it. Because, they're really trying to be AAA with this thing and get people using it. So when we come back, we're going to have more with Neal Hallford and his Betrayal at Krondor Remastered project, Amazon's Lumberyard, indie dev, all that good stuff. But don't forget, we'll have the tweet of the week before the show is over. First, I'm going to give some love to a sponsor. Then GL is going to take us to a break. Some Goblins are your friends. Game Goblins in Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. Conveniently located at 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock, and staffed by friendly employees. Game Goblins has expanded their store size, and there's plenty of room for exciting inventory and tables for play space. For all your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. Don't forget, that next weekend on the 16th, they're having their 4-year birthday with all kinds of cool events and stuff like that. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. GL, take us to a break, buddy.
Hold on to your butts.
June 11th to 12th at the State House Convention Center in Little Rock, the River City Comic Expo is Arkansas's largest comic, toy, game, cosplay convention and now features the Little Rock Picture Show. Guests for 2016 include Neal Adams, Mike Zeck, James Aubert, Larry Hama, Michael Golden, and Arkansas's own Mitch and Elizabeth Brettweiser, John Lucas, and Dusty Higgins. You'll find booth after booth with artists and dealers representing comics, toys, books, movies, games, and so much more. So come on out to the River City Comic Expo, June 11th and 12th at the State House Convention Center in Little Rock. RiverCityComicExpo.com.
Fairly alarmed here.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
Megawars.net. The classic online space strategy game has returned, bigger and better than ever before. Scout the universe and claim your empire. Construct, customize, and launch dozens of different starships. Battle thousands of opponents online in a team-based competition leading to the ultimate battle of the galaxies. Grab your slot today in one of the most hotly anticipated indie games of 2015. Visit megawars.net and get options only available during our pre-sale event running now. Megawars.net.
The die is cast. Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. We're joined by Neal Hallford, who's a friend of the show and a game developer and a movie maker and all kinds of cool stuff. We're talking about his Betrayal at Krondor RPG Remastered personal project and also the Amazon Lumberyard game design engine. If anybody wants to call in, there's still time, 501-823-0965. And you can also tweet me at Shane Plays. And I've actually got a couple. I want to talk about Lumberyard, Neal, and get your thoughts on that. I have a couple of messages to pass to you that have come up via social media. One, David Beatty, our mutual friend David, who is developing Mega Wars, says say hi to you. He's at work, so he can't call in, but he wanted to say hi to you. David. Yeah. And then there's a developer named Matthew, I think, that's been helping David Beatty. And he had a question for you. And he said, what's your favorite and least favorite change in the game industry since you started?
I would say that I think the least favorite thing that I like about the industry is just because a lot of these the projects that are out there right now have become so large that it becomes very complicated to get anything done.
Well.
And so...
Now stop making sense, Neal. Stop making sense.
And, it's just, the first games that whenever I first got in the industry, I was working for New World Computing, the Might and Magic folks. The first project that I was in charge of doing the design for, there were 3 of us that were the core team. And then we had one or two other people that were also helping out with it, but there were 3 of us that were doing all the work on that project. Krondor, I think there were about 14 of us that were core to the team, and then there were a handful of the people that were helping us out on that. And so now it's not unusual, particularly when you get on these teams for MMOs, and there's 300, 400 people, and it's just such a chore.
It's like making a movie, almost, or in some cases more. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I would say it's also hard for a singular vision to remain in place, right?
It's hard for that, and also too is just you're in those cases of the weekly meeting, which is basically a bunch of people sitting around in the room, and it takes 4 hours to get through the meeting, and nothing really all that productive gets done.
Well, I would also say most things, whether it's a game or any project in life, whether it's entertainment or not, that it's done by committee, usually has a lot of the essence and spirit and life sucked out of it.
Yeah.
So
it's very difficult to basically, because everybody now shoots for, it must be AAA, it must sell 10 million copies or 25 million copies and all this other crazy stuff. And so once you set that as your bar, everything that is unique about your game, everything that is different about your game gets thrown out the window, because you're saying, now I need to find the thing that appeals to
everybody.
The lowest denominator among all these people. And one of the first things that gets chucked out the window, storytelling.
Yep.
Okay, so
well, there's also, I've learned over life that, everyone talks about compromise.
Yeah.
But when you always compromise everything, like whether it's personal relationships or marriages or business or governments or whatever,
it's tough.
Nobody ever gets what they want. So nobody's ever totally happy. So, but anyway, moving out of the philosophical and back into, talking about game development, and people may differ with the opinion I just throw out, but I believe that sometimes it's like, don't compromise. Let this person get 100% of what they want. And the next time, let the other person get 100% of what they want. That way, at least occasionally we're getting what we want. But anyway, I do appreciate the question, Matthew. And thanks for waving and saying hi. I love David Beatty. He's a good guy, and I know he's a mutual friend.
Good guy.
Yeah, and he's right on the verge of really getting Mega Wars out there. So we've got just a few minutes left. I want to talk about what's your experience with the Lumberyard? And if people are like, what is Lumberyard? Most game development these days is, if you're not building your own custom engine and doing everything from the ground up, you're doing it in either Unity or you're doing it in Unreal. Now, Amazon recently said, hey, here's Lumberyard, and you can do your own games. And it also has like deep integration with Amazon Web Services and also Twitch. So they're kind of betting on, the social future, at least with Twitch. What has been your experience with the engine based on other stuff you've worked on?
I would say, first of all, I want to say that I love the guys that are there that are working on Lumberyard, because... So
you have a relationship with them? I mean, beyond just using their product?
I didn't realize that I had a relationship with him until I started working on it, because it actually, as it turns out, the guy who's in charge of their development is actually somebody who was a designer that worked with me on one of my past projects.
Oh. Can you share, do you feel comfortable sharing who that is and what the project was?
Yes, J.C. Connors.
Okay.
And he worked with John Cutter and I at Cave Dog. And, of course, Cave Dog was a wonderful little cradle of development that gave us Chris Taylor, it gave us Jeremy Soule, and a number of other folks that have gone on to great and wonderful things, all came out of Cave Dog.
Well, it also did it not give us the pinnacle of story and character development known as Dungeon Siege?
It might have, yes.
Yeah, I'm not dogging on Dungeon Siege is a fun game, so, yeah.
So, but of course that was developed at Gas Powered Games. But again, that was Chris Taylor,
right?
And so, but anyway, so a lot of great things came out of it. But J.C. Connors was working on a project with John Cutter and I called Elysium, which unfortunately never happened because Cave Dog. The big problem with Cave Dog was the fact that they were hyper ambitious and they tried to do 7 titles, all new titles as a new studio all at once. And that bit them in the butt. And the only thing that actually ever ended up coming out was Total Annihilation and Total Annihilation Kingdoms.
Right. Which were successful in their own right. At least the first Total Annihilation. I'm not sure about the follow-up, but I know Total Annihilation. Well, tell us a little bit, what are you seeing in Amazon's Lumberyard that you like or don't like? Or, for any indie devs that are out there listening, what would you recommend Lumberyard to them, and if so, why?
Yes. Well, I would recommend it to other devs, and just so everyone kind of understands this didn't come out of nowhere. Lumberyard is actually Amazon's refactor of the Crytek engine.
Okay.
And so all the wonderful rendering power and everything that came with Crytek is you have it with Lumberyard, but of course Lumberyard is the Amazon team is taking it off and they're adding new capabilities to it, and they're going to be kind of going off in their own direction in the long term with it. But the starting point was the Crytek 3 engine.
I did not. I don't think I knew that, or if I did know, I'd have forgot. So, anyone who's looked into the games that have been made with Crytek, it's an astonishing. I mean, it's a gorgeous engine. So, do you think it's got a future?
I definitely think it's got a future.
Okay. I mean, do you think it's going to be on the level of Unreal and Unity? Because they've got, they've got major market share or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Well, it definitely was, because keep in mind is that the other side of this gorilla is Amazon, the largest distributor of anything on the planet. And so whenever the fact you build in the fact that they own the cloud services that half of the MMOs on the planet already use.
Right. Are we talking about AWS, Amazon Web Services?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so
which Lumberyard already ties into?
Which Lumberyard already ties into, and so also then the Twitch integration, which is built into the engine itself from ground up. So you basically have a tool that's already set so that whenever you're done with your game, you're ready to distribute on Amazon. Click, bang, we're done. And so I think that
that's bigger than a lot of people realize.
That's gigantic.
Right.
That's gigantic, because basically saying that I have a game that I've built, and by the way, I have a distributor for it as soon as I'm done with it.
Right. It's turnkey is a phrase that you used to hear.
Turnkey. I mean, because it is or another one is owning the vertical. Owning the vertical.
Yep.
And so they pretty much set up themselves up in a situation where they can own the vertical. And so I would really say is that if you get an opportunity, if you really want to get interested in getting your toe in the door, this is something to do. Now, that said, this is probably not going to be your first game engine because it is built for developers.
Okay, so we're going to do something a little bit different here. When Neal and I were talking during the live radio show, we ran out of time right when he was kind of making a crucial point, kind of talking about Lumberyard. So this here, where actually Neal and I have followed up outside of the radio show so that he can expand on a comment so that we can make sure, because it's, we definitely want to make sure that his recommendations on Lumberyard are fully explored and not just, okay, we're out of time, and he didn't get his full thoughts in. So basically, we're recording this to edit it in the podcast version of the radio show right when I said, hey, do you recommend Lumberyard? And Neal was saying something along the lines of, well, if you're a very first time programmer, then, and then I was like, we're out of time. So basically, Neal, pretend that I asked you the question, and we're still in the show, and you have more time. So would you recommend Lumberyard to either existing or brand new game developers?
Absolutely, I would. And so, the thought that I was trying to express during the show is that it would be a difficult one, I think, for people who are brand new to trying to create their own games. I think this would be a very high cliff to kind of climb for first time users. Because
now, to be fair, could we also say the same about Unity and I always forget.
Oh, absolutely. That's totally fair. So it's not like we're saying that it's that this is easy for anyone. In terms of unless you have some experience and in terms of thinking about using flowcharts and thinking about things logically and everything else, it's going to be a lot to start off with, and I think it can be very intimidating because any game engine, you have all these different features, there's all these buttons and knobs, and what do I do with all this? Sorry, I hit the microphone here. I think that what I was simply trying to say is that if you are a first-time developer, this is probably not the first thing you want to go out and try to grab and learn how to do game development. Probably the smartest thing to do is you start off to get your feet wet with something like the Neverwinter Nights tool set, for instance, or something where a lot of functions are already built for you. You already have stuff to play with, and you have stuff that's already been integrated into the game. So I've got the characters, and I've got monsters, and I got all stuff. I don't have to worry about setting those things up graphically. I can just start messing around with it. But Lumberyard, if you have at least a little bit of experience or whatever, there are a lot of really exciting things about this game engine. Again, I think one of the things we touted earlier is the Twitch integration. The cloud integration stuff is already there, so that's fantastic. But something that I'm personally very excited about is that they use a visual scripting system. And what I mean by that is that ordinarily with most game engines, you are using some form of Lua or maybe Python or something to do the scripting for the game engine. But Lumberyard actually allows you, if you know how to draw flowcharts, they have an engine or have a system within the game engine that allows you to use these nodes, which act like little snippets of code, but you say, okay, connect this node to this node to this node, and each one of those things would be the equivalent of writing a piece of code. So you say, I want to open up so one of the things I've been working on this week is working on opening up the lid of the chests, the puzzle chest that will be in the game. And so it's so rather than sitting down and figuring out how to write a bit of code which tells it to open the lid, there are functions which say rotate and give me a name of an entity to rotate.
Do you literally? It almost sounds like it's a graphical thing that you drag on top of something. I mean, okay.
It's so you can basically grab one corner of this node and you connect it with a kind of a wire to another node, so you can connect together little pieces, which makes it so much faster to kind of quickly iterate on different on different things that you're trying to accomplish. And so,
and now, just to make sure I understand, are you saying that Unreal and Unity don't have that?
Unreal or Unity has that if you get one of their add-on the add-on products out there. They have something like that. But Crytek, of course, was this came from Crytek originally.
Right, Lumberyard, came out of the Crytek engine.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And so this is something they actually inherited from Crytek. And so whenever I've used other game engines, most of them, like I said, have been primarily all code-based. And the advantage is you're not spending crazy amounts of time trying to figure out, because you mistyped something in 300,000 lines of code. You're not looking for I forgot to close one of my curly braces, or I didn't put a semicolon there. Because these little bits of code are kind of already preset, they're already pre-created. All the mistakes boil down to, I connected the two wrong nodes together. But I can look at it and I can very quickly see, I see what's wrong here, because this is connected to the wrong thing. And so you can much more quickly evaluate stuff, and it's fantastic for those of us who are writers. This is fantastic for dialogue systems.
Yeah, because branching, a lot of people don't, in an RPG especially,
yes,
those branching dialogue systems can turn into quite the management.
Yes.
It's like, it gets exponentially more difficult very quickly than if you were just writing for a novel.
Exactly, and when you're adding in code in the middle of all that stuff, not only how it's branching, but all the things that have to happen in terms of check all these dozen variables, and are we, in the case of doing this stuff, are we turning on other variables in the world? So yes, I've talked to the man with a red hat, and after I get done with this, I need to increment a variable that says, Neal hates donkeys.
Yeah, right. Just something, right? Yeah. If this, then that. But
yeah.
I mean, it's a lot like, I in the Air Force, I was an electronic systems technician, and we studied Boolean logic for and you have AND gates and OR gates and NOR gates, and you have all this complicated if this then that, and it's a lot like this with these branching dialogues. It's almost like you're programming logic, not just writing dialogue.
Yeah, well, that's what it is.
Yeah,
and really at the heart of any game, if you want to go back to play your own adventure games. Really, whenever you say, if you make this choice, turn to page 47, and if you don't make this choice, turn to this other page. And it's really the same thing here, except with role-playing games, with computer role-playing games, you have the power to say, hey, you can make your choice trees really complex in terms of they've done this, they have this object, they've been here. You can have the dialogues branch on all of those different circumstances. And so it's very powerful in terms of what you're capable of doing. And so the beautiful thing about a visual scripting system is it makes it very easy for you to see what's going on and to evaluate what's going on with the dialogue. And so writers and people who have a writer's bent and really have a strong storyline will really love working with this, particularly if they've had to hard code a branching dialogue before.
Well, let me tell you, I used to, back in the day, and I mean back in the day, on my TI-99 4A, that was my stepdad's, I used to do choose your own adventure style programming in BASIC, where you had line numbers. And I remember writing stuff out, and I would have to leave in my code as I was writing it out, because instead of doing my work in class, I would sit there and write code, right? And so I'm writing it on paper because I don't have a computer with me. This was back in the days you didn't carry a computer around with you. And I would have to, if this happens, then and I would have to leave the line blank because I didn't know what line it was going to be when I got there,
Sure.
So I can only imagine complicating it by a magnitude of however many in a role-playing game where, you really go off into branching dialogue. So the point I'm saying, to have a visual node system where I can drag stuff, if this, I'm going to drag this stuff and just connect it in a GUI on a software. I mean, I could just really see the power of that. So even though I've never used any of these game development engines, but just to make sure I understand, I don't want to misrepresent anything. Lumberyard comes with this visual node system right out the gate.
Yes, it's part of it's a core part of the engine.
Now, Unity, it sounds like it's a add-on.
It is an add-on for Unity.
Okay, do we happen to know if Unreal has it?
I believe it may be, but to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I'm one of those strange animals where I never actually got around to trying out Unreal because the funny thing is for the vast majority of my career, almost every game that I've ever worked on, the company had its own proprietary engine, and so. Right. The frustrating thing is that people talk about, well, there's this engine and this engine, this engine, and so over the course of my career, I've worked with about 10 or 15 different game engines, and they're all different in terms of how they work. And so Actually, ironically, this game is not actually the first time I've worked with a visual scripting system. They had one for, we'll go back to 2004, when I was working for Sony Computer Entertainment America, and we were doing a Neopets title. And they had created a visual scripting system for it that it was not actually, it was created to work with the engine that they had, but it was not created within the game itself. You actually went into Visio and you created a flowchart, and then you were still writing code sort of inside Visio with little things that you would attach to the objects that you draw on the screen. And so it was it was sort of a step on the road to something like this. But at first, I totally hated it because I was so used to doing it old school.
Right.
But once I got used to it and I saw how powerful it was, I go, oh my God, why isn't everybody doing this? And I was so heartbroken whenever, after that, I'd left that company, whenever I was working on other projects, I said, okay, why doesn't everybody have some version of this? You should be building this right now. Yeah. This is amazing.
I think people might be surprised if they got behind the scenes on these major titles to see what kind of tools were being used behind the scenes. So,
it's everything. It is everything under the sun, and of course, everybody. It's a lot of the stuff is changing now. But back in the day, is you didn't want to use one of the engines like Unreal or some of these other things simply because, number one, it's technology you don't control. B, there were huge licensing fees,
right.
For using these or whatever. And there's some stuff that is sort of off the table for you, where if you want to make a fundamental change in which the way the engine works, you're going to have to basically talk to R&D at the people who own the engine. And so you've got an external team that are developing core tech for your game. And given the way that development works, the amount of time and craziness, I mean, it's crazy enough trying to get development done in-house.
Right.
But building tech outside of house is not something you want to do.
All right, that kind of begs the question, talking about these different engines,
mm-hmm.
why did you land on Lumberyard to do the Betrayal at Krondor Remastered pet project in?
It was, honestly, this is a brand spanking new release. I mean, the guts of it are not new. I mean, it is the Crytek engine, but they've made a lot of modifications already with it. But they just released this back in February. And whenever they made the announcement they were releasing it, for the part that I just was thinking about it is, I said, okay, this is connect to Amazon, and some of the stuff that they're, some of the things that make this unique is, again, the cloud integration, Twitch, and all this other stuff. So this is a brand spanking new engine. And the thing I was thinking too is that this is a 2-for-1 educational thing for me, because not only do I learn Lumberyard, but I also learn Crytek to boot.
Right.
So I'm really learning 2 game engines at once. And so, granted, where Lumberyard right now is a point of departure. But there's still so much of the Crytek genetics in them that as I'm doing it, I'm definitely learning this is how the Crytek engine works, and I'm seeing where Lumberyard is going to move forward and where it's going to depart. Because I think with Lumberyard, I think their big goal is to have something that is maybe a little more accessible to the public, and some of the stuff in Crytek is a little arcane.
Well, any older engine you can say that about, right?
Yes.
So
and well, also too is that the old thing about with great power comes great responsibility. And of course the other adage in the game industry with great power comes lack of documentation.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's something where right now Lumberyard, I think they're definitely working towards trying to make things a little more accessible. Of course, they're having some growing pains from the standpoint of some people are coming in who know something about Crytek, and stuff doesn't work exactly the way it works in Crytek, or some of the features are being changed, and so some of those folks are a little bit confused. And of course, Lumberyard, I mean, they just got themselves released in February, and it's
they haven't been out that long. February, March, I mean, a couple months, and you were able to jump right in and immediately begin working on. I mean, so it's a full featured tool already. I mean, you jumped right in and started working on your Betrayal at Krondor Remastered project.
Yeah.
So
so it was, and I got, like I said, was very excited because within about 2 or 3 weeks, I was able to completely reconstruct the way our dialogue and keyword system.
And would you say part of that swiftness was because of that visual node system that you mentioned? Okay,
absolutely. And so I was able to iterate very quickly. The beautiful thing too about the visual system is the fact that on one of my monitors I have my flow nodes open that are showing me how things are branching. And I can make a very quick change over there, and I can see that change reflected immediately in the other monitor, and so it's instantaneous. I'm not having.
So you don't have to like compile or.
I don't have to compile. I don't have to exit out of whatever. I just change a node. I go over, run the game again, and it's already made those changes.
Well, I'll tell you just from my experience with software development, not game development. That right there is powerful. Not to have to. Okay, well, I'm gonna rerun everything. Let me go grab a cup of coffee. Hope there aren't any errors, and then I'll see what my changes did. When it comes out of the oven. So, well, okay. So it sounds very cool, and I also wanted to ask or point out, if I understand correctly, you've talked about maybe doing some of your your Patreon content is also not just, hey, here's Betrayal at Krondor, but here's a little bit of how to use Lumberyard, right?
Yeah. So that's where I'm going to be heading. Right now, I haven't done anything exclusive on this on the engine just yet, because the one thing I don't want to do is pass on bad habits.
Okay. Yeah.
But also too is I just want to show is that here we're showing sort of what we're doing, what I'm doing. But with Patreon, one of the things I want to do is create tutorials and also just show, here is, for those of you who are really interested in, here's how we're making the sausage, is that here's how the system works in terms of the dialogue and keyword system. So you can see the interaction between the XML files and the flow nodes and all these elements. And so how does this work, and how do the chest and the puzzle chest systems work? Right. And so for people who are interested, I'm going to give more in-depth stuff on my Patreon so that people who are interested in this sort of thing can use it as a guide for maybe programming or creating their own stuff in Lumberyard. So
are you going to put on a big, basically afro wig and be like Bob Ross and be like, we're going to put some fluffy we're gonna put some fluffy little monsters over here.
Fluffy little monsters.
Fluffy little monsters. Oh, that looks nice. So, all right. Well, Neal, thanks so much for giving me a little bit more of your time. Like you, I wanted to expand on that comment because I felt that was kind of misrepresentative of what we were trying to say. It in general, not with Lumberyard, but with any game development, you're saying you might want to get your feet wet with some of the tools that are out there, like Neverwinter Nights, or even like Shadowrun Returns has a good engine where you can build your own levels and stuff like that. That's what you were saying, was kind of play around with that before you want to tackle one of these more.
Get your feet wet with those things, because honestly, there's a lot of stuff for you that's already built. It already works. It's just a matter of, okay, I'm going to change these monsters, and this is how much damage I'm going to get whenever this happens. Or I'm basically changing the words of the dialogue structure, but all of those pieces are already built, because that's sort of the difference between doing what I'm doing, which is basically building a game from scratch.
Right.
And as opposed to modding an existing game where it's sort of cut and paste in terms of replace this dialogue, change where things happen, but that process is still very much the same in terms of you get used to, this is how I create an event, this is how I fire an event. Right. And so once you understand the logic of those things, it will be much easier for you to move on to, okay, so now I've kind of took my baby steps. I'll say now that I know how these kind of things work in general, now I can get into something like Lumberyard, or for those of you that are into 2D, the other engine I recommend for people who are into 2D are Corona, the Corona game engine, which is great if you're looking to do mobile app stuff. I really like it a lot. Though ultimately another cool thing about Lumberyard, another thing for it is that this builds this API will allow you to build for Android, for PlayStation 4, and so if you want to build your apps for other platforms, they're set up so that you can export in various different formats. So that's another thing too that's in there.
That's nice. Yeah. So it sounds really, and again, this is free. They've offered it out there for free.
Well, it is free if you are doing single player. Now that you will pay something if you want to do multiplayer or if you want to do some of this other stuff. So there's some additional costs, and you'll have to go kind of investigate what those costs are.
Well, right there. I mean, if you want to have multiplayer, which means you need to have a server somewhere.
Yes.
Then they're like it defaults over to Amazon Web Services, which has its own costs. And I think the Twitch integration maybe is one of the ways that, because nothing in life is free. Right. I mean, they're giving you a pretty rich tool here to do game development with, but if you're going to pay somebody somewhere if you want to have servers running the multiplayer. Mm-hmm. So they're not trying to bait and switch anybody. So,
no, not at all. But it's I'm just kind of perverting what they're trying to do in terms of is that as long as you're doing something that's single player, or whatever, they don't care. And honestly, if you want to learn how to use the engine, that's what I would recommend you do first anyway, is build something as a single player game first, because trying to get into multiplayer code and thinking about what if 5 other people are trying to interact with this thing at the same time, you need to learn the basics first. Walk before you run.
Well, can I ask for 2 favors in your Well, okay then, folks. This has been Neal Hallford.
What can I do for you, man?
Can you put, for my friend Matt Barton, who you've been on his show?
I have been on a show, and Matt is a very good guy. I love him to death.
Can you put an extra rat in there to be killed somewhere? That would make it. That would make him.
Barton?
Yeah, make a rat Barton that can be killed. That would make him happy, because you're talking about you might put in a little bit of extra content for if we could have just one extra rat somewhere that you can slay in honor of Matt Barton, he would be.
I think I'll see what I can do with that. I think we can probably find a rat I can put in here somewhere.
Yeah, and then we should have another an NPC that, like, while you're doing a really important dialogue with like one of the main NPCs in the game, this guy named Shanus Playus jumps out and he goes, "That's it, we're out of time," and the party gets to execute a savage butt stomp on him. How would that be?
I will make that happen. So one of the things, actually, too, if people want to kind of see what I've done so far, there's a video that's it's not locked up under Patreon. It's just on YouTube. So go hit my stuff on YouTube. I can't remember whether I'm under Neal Hallford or Nealios, which is
I'm gonna look right now. So.
But if you go and look at that, and I have Betrayal at Krondor Remastered dialogue and keywords, and so you can see the first, our first video installment of sort of us, what we've done so far. But you'll see that I've already got some kind of new content in the game. There'll be a few
I watched that actually. Yeah, I did watch that where you're like having a little bit of fun with it. Yeah.
Yes.
So
I'm going to have a few little things like that inside the game. So
all right. Well, it's actually under Neal Hallford is where it's under.
Hallford, okay.
Yeah, it's under Neal. I'm subscribed to you. So yeah, and you've got specifically for Betrayal at Krondor, you've got the remastered dialogue, and then you also have a puzzle chest animation test. So,
right.
Yeah, neat stuff. All right, well, Neal, thanks again for your extended time. This will definitely make it into the podcast and the Krypton radio versions of the show.
That's DLC, folks.
Yeah, you got special Neal Hallford DLC on Shane Plays. So thanks so much again. And for burgeoning game developers out there, definitely keep up with what Neal's doing. You're going to learn some stuff. So check out his YouTube and his Patreon and all that stuff. So I'm gonna edit this into the podcast. So actually, you're going to talk a little bit more after this, Neal, but it's pre-recorded. So we'll do our wrap up in the show. So it's going to be like. Bye, Neal. I'm saying bye, and then all of a sudden you're going to keep talking because we're editing it into the show. So go ahead and say goodbye. Go ahead and say goodbye now, and then we'll really confuse people when you keep talking right after that.
I'm trying to say goodbye, Neal. No.
Yeah. Goodbye, Neal. Yeah, good night, Gracie. All right. Well, Neal, thanks so much again. I really, really appreciate you. So.
No problem, and great talking with you, Shane.
Yeah, definitely.
We got a minute left. I got to wrap us, Neal.
Sure.
Man, thanks so much for being on the show. Let me tell you a couple things. One, excited to see what you're doing. Two, you're a friend of the show. You're always welcome back on. Even if you just want to come hang out on a Saturday, if you got a free Saturday afternoon and call in and guest host, you're welcome to. But I got to let you go. Folks, thanks for listening. And let me wrap the show here real quick. Remember, we can always be caught as a podcast after the live show. It'll be out in the next couple of days. Next week, we have Gamers Playing On that is doing interesting stuff to help people play RPGs online. And then here's the tweet of the week from Dungeon Facts. I live in a fantasy world full of undead horrors, man-eating dragons, and infinite hells of demons because the real world is much scarier. What do you think about that, Neal?
Not far from the truth.
All right. And on that note, we'll end. Thanks, Neal. Everybody have a great week. Thanks for listening to Shane Plays Radio.